Hello, beloved community, and welcome to the fourth Sunday of Easter. This week, we find ourselves in the Gospel of John, where we're going to get real about relationships. So, as I said, we will find ourselves in the Gospel of John, the 10th chapter. I'm going to begin reading in the 11th verse, and I encourage you to listen along or read along, however you feel most led today. So let's listen for a word from God. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. When the hired hand sees the wolf coming, he leaves the sheep and runs away. That's because he isn't the shepherd. The sheep aren't really his, so the wolf attacks the sheep and scatters them. He's only a hired hand, and the sheep don't matter to him. I am the good shepherd. I know my own sheep, and they know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. I give up my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that don't belong to this sheep pen. I must lead them too. They will listen to my voice, and there will be one flock and one shepherd. This is why the Father loves me. I give up my life so that I can take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I give it up because I want to. I have the right to give it up, and I have the right to take it up again. I received this commandment from my Father. These are God's words for God's people. Thanks be to God. So we pick up in this passage, kind of in the middle of some of Jesus' I am statements, particularly in this passage about sheep and shepherds, right? And even before we get there, Jesus has found out that some of the leaders have expelled a man born blind. And so this propels us into this conversation about the shepherd caring for the sheep, and even before, about Jesus calling himself the gate. And what I love about this passage is that Jesus is gathering a group of folks, not just even in this passage, but we think about the ways of Jesus' life and Jesus' ministry. And Jesus is gathering a group of folks who don't have a place in the synagogue, who don't have a place of sanctuary, who don't have a community, who don't have this feeling and sense of belonging or fitting in. How many people in our community, how many of us often feel like we don't have a place in the church? We don't have a place to belong. And here is Jesus. Jesus is gathering up sheep, is gathering up a flock of folk who don't belong, who aren't included, who are excluded from the synagogue. And how beautiful is that as we think about relationships, as we think about real, powerful relationships, that Jesus is actively seeking out folks to be in relationship with, folks that are so neglected and forgotten. And so this relationship that we see in this passage is not just with Jesus and his sheep and the flock, us as people. It's also about Jesus' relationship with God. And as we think about, as I said in the very beginning, that we're going to talk about real relationships. For Jesus, as we think about Jesus' relationship with the Father, with God, in this passage, it's one of mutuality. That there's communication Just as the Father knows me, I know the Father. So it's not just God knowing Jesus. It's not just Jesus knowing God, but there's this mutuality where they are both known by one another. As we think about it being mutual, it is not one-sided. We talk a lot about healthy mutual relationships in our community, that it's not just about one person always getting, or one person giving. That a healthy mutual relationship is one where both can have a voice, where both can be seen and heard and acknowledged, where both can feel valuable. And that relationship in this passage particularly extends to Jesus' flock. That not only does Jesus as the shepherd know his sheep, but his sheep know him. That there's mutuality there. And that mutuality is important, and particularly as we think about healthy, mutual, real relationships, that it is about connecting. It's about desiring to know names, to have the kind of depth of a relationship where someone can know you by your voice. I think about, I had an encounter earlier in the week where somebody was wearing a mask and they were dressed very differently than I'd ever seen them. And I didn't recognize them. But it wasn't until I heard their voice and I said, I know now who you are because of your voice. And so this is the kind of depth that Jesus is having with his sheep, with the flock, and the flock have with Jesus, is that it's got a depth to it, a sense of relationship that even if we can't recognize visually one another, we know one another by their mannerisms, the way they carry their body, the way their voice sounds, because we've spent time with them. We've engaged with them. And so I love that Jesus is one who demonstrates what real relationships are. Again, Jesus is gathering a very unique flock of forgotten. That Jesus is in relationship with folks in a mutual way, that not only do we know Jesus, but Jesus knows us, or vice versa. And again, that Jesus also has this relationship with God. And particularly as we continue to think about this passage, there's so much beauty and depth in this passage as we think about Jesus as the shepherd, as we think about continuing to be in the season of Easter, that Jesus talks about the shepherd laying down his life. If we think about the role of the shepherd is to protect and to nourish and to care for the flock, what good is a dead shepherd to the flock? But Easter speaks of something greater than just death, right? That not only does the shepherd lay down his life, but can take back his life, right? That there is this resurrection, that it is in Christ's death and resurrection that we now have life, that we have this fullness, this beauty of grace, of being known, of being made human again, of being called valuable. And that is the beauty and the power of being in a real relationship. A relationship with one who's going to gather us up, even when we're awkward, even when we screw up, and when we're not invited or included or feel welcomed. Jesus says, no, I want you in my flock. And not only do I want you in my flock, but I want you to have a voice. I want you to be seen, and I want you to see. And Jesus demonstrates that as the shepherd with his sheep and in relationship with God. Because that's the power of being in real relationship.